Thanks. I'm Barb Taves. I'm assistant professor in the Criminal Justice Department in the Social Work and Criminal Justice program. And I'm going to introduce you to the research that I do related to restorative justice and architecture. And I'll start by giving you the philosophical frame between criminal justice and restorative justice, and then we'll get to the architecture part. So you can just skip through. You can read about my bio some other time. So we can think about criminal justice like this butterfly. It really takes a close-up approach at the offender, broken laws, guilt, and just desserts. And it really seems beautiful and natural, right? But when we look at the underlying values, we have a different picture where criminal justice is actually like a boxing match. Prosecution and defense are in a competition. A referee is determining who wins. The crowd is cheering. And in the end, winner and loser walks away hurt. Restorative justice takes a different view, a wide view, a view that incorporates the victim and the community and causes for crime. And so it's not just focused singularly on the offender, and then takes a different values approach. That the values, instead of being about punishment and disrespect, it's instead focusing on repair and healing for the victim, respect and dignity for both the victim and the offender, and really holding offenders accountable for what they've done. So this actually has something to say about architecture, because architecture communicates. It can communicate our social values, communicates about power, who's included and excluded, and that's the same for justice architecture. So if we take our typical courtroom, we have a judge who sits on a raised platform typically. We have the defense and prosecution facing the judge in their competition. And then behind a barrier, we have the community and the victim just passively watching what's going on. In many ways, it's a nice corporate image of a boxing ring. What becomes interesting, though, is that when we ask victims about how they feel about this design of the courthouse, they actually use words of dead and meaningless. They don't see how it shows any concern for them, and they actually feel insignificant. The same can be said for prisons, is that it's addressing punishment. The grayness of it speaks to hopelessness. The heavy concrete is talking about the force. The really small isolated cells are about isolation. And we want people to be changing while they're there, but actually incarcerated people suggest that while they're in prison, they actually lose all focus and motivation. They're not interested in doing anything. They feel like failures, and they feel like they can't do anything right. So when we're thinking about our justice, we actually want to be creating justice architecture that's more about healing and reparation and less about putting people down and making them feel like they're not important. So how should we be thinking about justice architecture? That's what my question is that I'm looking at. What do victims and offenders actually need from their justice architecture? And so I engage offenders in creating three-dimensional designs of environments that meet their needs, and then also having victims work with imagery to look at spaces that meet their needs. Across the board, both victims and offenders want access to nature, outside, inside, views of nature. They find hope and life and possibility coming from that interaction with nature. And really, that's not surprising. There's substantial research about the physical and emotional benefits of nature. What becomes really unique here is that we have victims and offenders making the link between that access to nature and justice and their justice needs. The second characteristic that both offenders and victims share is they want house-like settings. They want places with rooms for different purposes. They want spaces they can personalize. They want spaces in which to entertain. But really, it's not about house particularly. It's about home. They want places where they can breathe, where they can be relieved from stressors, where they can be themselves. For victims, they want places of familial fellowship, of being in relationship. They want places that are worn and comfy. They want paths to show that there's a way to move forward with their life. For offenders, they're also wanting home, and in these spaces, they're imagining the peacefulness they seek from chaos in their lives, affirmation, motivation, and actually feelings like they can prosper in their life. So, victims, we need to be thinking about this different way of doing design, thinking about how do we create spaces that actually help victims heal and hold offenders accountable and welcome people for who they are. But I want to end on the note that it's not just about making prisons pretty or about putting a victim room in the courthouse. It's really fundamentally transforming our philosophical approach to justice. To do anything less is just to wallpaper over the problem. Thank you.